Spot On Sports is being brought to you by Belfast Gastro Pub, where love stories begin. Located at 101 North Wellwood Avenue, Lindenhurst, New York.
Now it's time for Spot On Sports. Here's your hosts, Mike Trezor and Mike Cadone.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Spot On Sports, New York's premier sports talk program where we talk New York sports, all New York sports, and nothing but New York sports. My name is Mike Trezor, the great Michael Anthony driving the train for us tonight. And unfortunately, folks, Mike Cadone, my co-host, could not be here because of a transportation issue. He did have a mechanical breakdown, no other kind of breakdown. So we wish Mike the best in getting that situation straightened out as quickly and with it at the minimal amount of hassle that possibly can be. And in the meantime, I want to welcome in our guest for today. He is a former All-Pro defensive lineman for the New York Jets, and now you hear him on New York Jet radio broadcasts. And of course, I'm talking about number 93, Marty Lyons. Marty, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you.
And it's great to have you. So the first thing that everybody in New York wants to know, Marty, everybody's been talking about it all offseason, all training camp. The thing that people want to know, whether they're Jet fans or not, they want to know about Zach Wilson. So talk to me about Zach Wilson. What have you seen from the young man that you like? What have you seen from him, areas that maybe he still is going to need a little work once the regular season starts?
Well, you know what, Mike? I've been around him a couple times, and he's got great leadership qualities. He can make all the throws. He can handle the huddle. He can handle the pressure. And I think the one thing going for him is when he makes a mistake, he wants to learn from that mistake. And if the mistake is made at practice, you know, it's better to make it there than in the game. And I think with the coaching staff that he has and the players that he has, I'm excited for the opportunity. But the big thing that the Jets have to do is they have to be able to stay healthy. The last couple of years, I think that they had 16 different offensive line up to start games. You just have no chemistry, you have no continuity, and as a result, you end up going 2-14.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you also, Marty, you alluded to the coaching staff with Robert Saleh, the new head coach. What have you seen from him during the course of this training camp that you've liked?
You know what, Mike? He's cool, he's collective, he's focused, and he has a lot of energy. And I'm a firm believer that the players will take on the personality of their head coach. And if they take that energy that he brings every single game, and then they take it out there on the field and they play. His motto is, you know, all gas, no brakes. Leave it out there on the field. I'm really impressed with him. I had an opportunity to sit down and talk to him. And at the end of the conversation, I kind of gave him a pat on the back and said, you know, Coach, I've been waiting for somebody like you for 43 years. So I'm excited about the opportunity that he brings as a coaching staff. And when you look at the way that he put together his coaching staff, but also look at the GM, what Joe Douglas has done. Joe Douglas, he came off that Ozzie Newsome tree. And I was good friends with Ozzie. He was a teammate down at the University of Alabama. Great deal of respect for him, an NFL executive. And I think Joe's got him moving in the right direction.
And for our listeners and viewers, folks, please comment us. If you want a comment and direct it to Marty, I'll make sure that we are able to ask you a question to Marty. But the question I wanted to ask you, Marty, was during the time Sam Darnold was quarterbacking this team, one of the sort of issues that was continually raised was the lack of offensive weapons around him. And now with the Jets, of course, Crowder has been here for a while. Denzel Mims is ready to emerge. And this year you drafted Elijah Moore. Can you talk to us a little bit about the offensive weapons around Zach Wilson this year and what you think about them?
Well, you know what, Mike? Now you can spread the ball around. And if you can get a tight end like Tyler Kroft to go out there and produce, you're going to take that tight end has to have 40 to 50 catches during the year. That'll lock up those safeties and open up those underneath passes to the wide receiver. And you're exactly right. I really enjoyed Sam, but I think he went to the card game without all the aces in the deck. And unfortunately, that's life in the NFL. You can't make excuses. His offensive line didn't protect him. He didn't have the proper weapons on the outside. But I think the Jets had a great deal of respect for him because they actually moved him down to Carolina Panthers, which will give him another opportunity to pick up his career.
Somebody just commented us, Marty. I couldn't see the person's name, but he did want to know about the running game for the Jets this year. What can you tell us about that?
I think you're going to have a 1-2 punch, maybe 3 run by committee, but I think Ty Johnson's going to get the bulk of it. He reminds me a little bit on a smaller dimension, like an Earl Campbell. He's the type of guy that he has the speed to go outside the tackles. He'll run inside the tackles. But when he sees a defender, he's not shaking and baking. He's going to run him over. He's going to deliver some punishment to anybody that comes up to try to tackle him.
And does this offense that Coach Sala and his staff have now installed include a lot of passes to the running backs?
Well, we hope so. I think so. I think they're going to split them out there, put them in the slot position, or take them all the way out, put them up by the sideline. I think in today's world of the NFL, you can have quality running backs, but they have to be able to, number one, on blitz, pick up the blitzer, and number two, when you slide out and your quarterback's in trouble, you got to be able to catch the ball. And I think all the running backs the Jets have now, they're all capable of doing that.
I want to ask you about the offensive line, which you mentioned a little bit earlier. Obviously, Mekhi Becton is poised to be a star. The kid that they drafted in the first round, Elijah Vera Tucker, seems like he's coming on strong. What can you tell us about the offensive line as we get ready to start this season?
Well, number one, Mike, it starts with the center. It starts with Connor McGovern. He's got to come up and recognize all the different defensive sets so that he can call whatever protection he knows, whether Zach is rolling to his right, rolling to his left. He's got to make those calls. And I was very impressed with the way the offensive line played during the 3 preseason games. Even though they didn't get a lot of playing time, it looked like they had a little bit of chemistry. Vera Tucker didn't play at all, so he's got to get in there. But I think, you get out there and you practice. And you learn what other players are capable of doing, and you start to depend on them. It's like I was very fortunate. I played alongside of Joe Klecko, and Joe had a rule. He said, you know what, you better be ready to play, because if you're not ready to play, you're either going to get yourself hurt or, more importantly, you're going to get me hurt. So, Joe and I had a great relationship. I know he made it to the final 5 of the senior vote for the Hall of Fame, and we're going to keep knocking because Joe definitely needs to be in Canton.
Oh, absolutely, Marty. I mean, anybody who watched the Jets during that era would agree with you. The guy was an all-pro at 3 different positions. If I'm not mistaken, the only guy to be named all-pro at 3 different positions.
Yeah, he was probably the most valuable teammate because he influenced not just the defense, but also the offense. And he should be rewarded. He shouldn't be punished because we weren't good enough as a team to make it to the Super Bowl. We made it to one AFC championship game. We lost to Miami 14-0. Richard didn't have one of his better days. And, we got that little pat on the back and they said, don't worry, we'll get him next year. And then a couple weeks later, they fired Walt Michaels. They bring in Joe Walton. And then the team got dismantled. 86. We made a nice little run again, losing in double overtime to Cleveland. And it was always, don't worry, we'll get them next year. But the body runs out of next year's.
Yeah.
You never know when that next year is going to end. And especially nowadays because they have free agency. We couldn't move from team to team. We couldn't sell our ability or talent. We were with the Jets, and that's who you stayed with.
And for those folks who might be a little bit too young to remember Marty's playing career, Marty was a member of that great New York Sack Exchange, along with Joe Klecko, Mark Gastineau, Abdul Salam, guys like that, that were very, very prominent in the early 80s to mid 80s. Marty had a great playing career. But Marty, I wanted to go back to this year's team, since we're on the subject of defensive line, and ask you about the defense for this year's team. Obviously, losing Carl Lawson was a big loss early in, or I shouldn't say early in training camp, but in the middle of training camp. Jets went out recently and acquired Shaq Lawson. So what do you think about the defense? Let's start with up front going into this season.
Well, starting up front, it's going to start with Quentin Williams. You know, it was a former #1 pick. I believe he had 7.5 sacks last year in 13 games. But there's another individual that can change the way the Jets play, but he's got to stay healthy. His first 2 seasons, he was banged up. And, you know, when you're drafted in the first round, expectations are so high. Demands are so high. And he went out there, and he's a quality individual. First of all, quality individual, and he can play the game. You look at Foley, he's a strong defensive tackle, played at UConn. And then, you know, you look at the second level. You got C.J. Mosley. People forget the impact C.J. Mosley had 2 years ago, opening day against the Buffalo Bills. You know, picked up a fumble, also had an interception return for a touchdown, broke up a touchdown pass in the end zone. Then he pulls his groin, comes back, he gets hurt again. Last year, he opted out because of the virus. Quality player, still has a lot of playing ability. And then on the backside, it starts with Marcus May. You know, Marcus May is one of those individuals that if the defense calls for him, he's a strong enough player. You can move him in the box, just like they did with Jamal Adams. When, you know, you put Jamal Adams up on the line of scrimmage and there's nobody to block him, and he comes around the corner, as long as you can cut that corner short, there's a good chance you get to the quarterback. And Marcus May, again, I think that what the Jets have focused in the last 2 drafts, they want quality individuals. And I think that's Joe Douglas. I want players that can play, but I want quality individuals. I want them to represent the New York Jets, represent the NFL, and I want them to be productive.
All right. I wanted to ask you about the season opener, Marty. And obviously the storyline that everybody's going to focus on again with the Panthers is Sam Darnold going against his old team, the old Jet quarterback, against the new Jet quarterback. What other storylines do you see shaping up for this season opener that fans might not be really tuned into yet, but you think that maybe they should be?
Well, number one, I don't think you should be tuned in like it's Sam Darnold versus Zach Wilson. There's 10 other players out there on the field.
Of
and
course.
They're both offensive players. They're both quarterbacks. I think Sam wants to prove to the Jets that he's still able to play. And I think Zach wants to prove that, you know what, when you drafted me in the first round, 2nd overall, I want to prove to you that I can play. I think it's going to be, you know, a great team effort for the Jets this year. The one thing that they have to do is they've got to score more points on offense. Last year they averaged, I think, 15.3 per game, which was last in the NFL. You will not see many games in the NFL anymore that are won 10-7, 7-3. It's an offensive style game in the NFL now. And they just have to adapt to it, and they've got to score points.
Spot on Sports, Mike Trezza. I'm speaking with former Jet standout and current Jet broadcaster Marty Lyons. Marty, I wanted to go around the AFC East with you for a couple minutes. Obviously, the big team now, the one everybody's going to be gunning for, are the Buffalo Bills. Their quarterback got a nice, hefty contract in the offseason, and they're ready to go. What's your assessment of the Bills as we enter the 2021 season?
Well, yeah, I think Josh Allen proved that he can play. And what he has to do is get over the hurdle You make it to the AFC Championship game, but you lose to Patrick Mahomes. So he knows what it feels like. And I think it all starts around him, and it starts around, Coach McDermott up there. He's a quality coach. He knows what he wants to do. That's the team to beat if you're in the AFC East. You got the New England Patriots. They're trying to rebuild. They just let go of Cam Newton, but they got a quality quarterback again from Alabama, in Mac Jones. He's a quality quarterback. And then you go down to Miami and you got Tua, who he came from Alabama. And, when you play at Alabama and you play for Nick Saban, he's already got you prepared for the NFL.
I wanted to ask you, Marty, about the Patriots specifically. You jumped ahead of me just a little bit, and about the quarterback competition that unfolded up there. Were you surprised that Bill Belichick made the decision to move on from Cam Newton and to hand the job over to the kid from your alma mater?
Well, you know what, Mike? Anything that Bill Belichick does not surprise me. You know what? Bill Belichick, he has one way of running his program, and it's his way. And he's off that coaching tree of Bill Parcells. And Coach Parcells was the same way. They worked on the little things. When Coach Parcells was here with the Jets, I was actually doing the TV show then, and I would go out to watch practice, and everybody had their helmet on the right side, right next to them when they warmed up. Meanwhile, a couple years previous to Coach Parcells getting there, guys had helmets on the left, helmets on the right. They were jumping jacks. Nobody had any discipline.
Right.
But when Coach Parcells came in there, he worked on the little things. You're never going to accomplish anything in life if you don't accomplish the little things first.
I wanted to also ask you, you alluded to the Dolphins. Obviously, Tua is now their starter. He's got a little bit of pressure on him coming into this season. What do you think about their overall chances to make some noise in this division?
Well, it's like anything, Mike. You got to start fast and finish strong. When the Jets started last year, I think they were 0-8. And then everybody wanted them to tank it for Trevor Lawrence. But you know what? As a former player, the only way that I would ever say, hey, I'm going to tank it, you take my helmet. Tell me I'm not playing. Because these guys have worked so hard their entire life to get here. They have a great deal of pride, a great deal of respect in themselves. So they went out there and they tried to win every game. Then you go out and you beat the Rams, which was totally unexpected. You just went out there, you played a solid game. Everybody's saying, hey, why did you win? Well, that's what you're supposed to do in the NFL. So,
yeah, I wanted to ask you, Marty. I'm not going to try to pin you down to a prediction of number of wins. It's not fair of me to ask you that. But what I want to know from you in the prediction business is this: when December 1st comes around, will the New York Jets still be alive for a playoff spot in the AFC?
You know what, Mike? I will say if they stay healthy the entire year, I think they'll have a chance. You know what? Somebody asked me the other day, how many games could the Jets win in a season? I said 17, because that's what there is. There's 17. How many will they win? I don't know. But I think this group of players with this coaching staff, they're going to line up every single week, and they're going to be exciting to watch.
Marty, you brought up an interesting point when we were talking off the air before the show started, and that was how NFL coaches now need to handle preseason. And, sort of the conundrum is, do you play your starters, especially your starting quarterback, and get them those valuable reps? Or do you sit them on the sideline like we saw Mosley with Daniel Jones with the Giants and some others? How would you, as a head coach, navigate that issue?
Well, first of all, you need the reps, and you're getting a lot of reps during practice time. Second, with what the Jets did this year and what most teams did this year is, if they were playing Green Bay, they went out there and they had 2 days of practice against the Green Bay Packers. So why would you risk your players in a game now? Because remember, in practice, the quarterback's wearing a red jersey. In the game, he's not. So you don't want to take a chance of them getting hurt. It is important to play in the games because you need to understand clock management. What are we going to do? 2-minute drills. But all of that can be replicated during practice time. And the Jets had the Eagles up here for 2 days. They practiced 1 against 1s, 2s against 2s. So why do you need the preseason game? And Mike, last year during the 2020 pandemic, there was no preseasons. And it seemed like most of the players made out pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right about that. I wanted to ask you, I see the comments. I see the comment from Lenny. Lenny, I appreciate it. We already talked about Robert Saleh, but I do appreciate you commenting us. If you want to come up with a different question for Marty, I'll make sure I ask him. Marty, I asked you this question off the air before we started. Let me ask it now, and that is comparing your playing days to now. Are there things about the way the game has changed that make you, face palm and say, I really can't take this? Or is there any, do you appreciate all the ways the game has changed since your playing days?
I appreciate the fact that the players are finally getting paid. Do I think that the players deserve that much money? I think the players deserve it before the owners. Because any given play, like Dennis Bird, one play like that, and your whole life changes.
Absolutely.
So, I'm happy for all the players. I think a lot of times that, during my era, we spent a lot of time out in the community. That's when the Jets we were over there in Hempstead, but you had the Islanders. They were over there. They were winning all the Stanley Cups. So when you went to a charity event, you had a few Jet players, but you had the Bobby Nystrom, Clark Gillies, Kenny Morrow. All those guys would come out. And unfortunately, we don't hear enough of that from the current players. I know they do it, but I think we need to hear more of the positive things that the NFL players are doing rather than opening up the newspaper and just focusing on the negative.
Yeah, Marty, speaking of ways that the game has changed and speaking about, the economic struggles between player and owner, I just had an interesting comment. One of our listeners and viewers wants to know, what does Marty think about the new 17-game schedule?
Well, it's still 20 games overall. So you bypass your 4th preseason game. And, Mike, you and I talked about the preseason games. I think I don't want to say they're totally useless because you got young players that really want to get out there. And if you get out there and you're on film, maybe you're not good enough for the Jets, but there's 31 other teams that may look at you. It's a very physical sport. 17 games is a long time to try to stay healthy. A big difference when, talking about 40 years ago when we were playing, if you got hurt, you played. If you got injured, you didn't play. So there was a big difference between those two words.
And also no injured reserve from which you could come back that season. Once you got put on IR, you were done.
Right. That happened to me in my 12th year with the Jets. I tore my bicep. I went on IR before the start of the season, which meant I was done.
Wow. So, Marty, I asked you this off the air. I just wanted to clarify it. So, at least for the first half of the season, you and Bob Wischusen, who both do an excellent job on Jet radio broadcasts, will be doing the games from New York.
We will be doing the games, away game from the Jet complex.
Right.
In Florham Park.
In Florham Park.
We will actually be doing the home games from MetLife Stadium up in the press box.
Okay.
But the NFL protocol is really going to limit how much interacting we can have with the players.
Yeah.
And you know what? That was the hardest thing last year, Mike, is, you get your draft class, and usually Bob and I can mingle with the coaches. You go down there before the game. They somewhat give you a game plan because they know you're an extension to the Jets. If I can help you be better at your broadcast. Why not? But we couldn't go down on the field. So everybody that came in last year, you never got to have an opportunity to meet him. I never got to meet Mackay. Mackay's a big man. A big man. The one guy that I missed was I wanted to meet Frank Gore because I admired the way that he played the game his entire career.
Been around a long time.
And for some of the young kids, I would say on the broadcast, take time to watch him. Take time to know him. Because years from now, when you're sitting there talking with your kids and he goes into the Hall of Fame, you can say, hey, guess what? I played with him.
Will this present some challenges to you and Bob trying to do the game off of a monitor? Because I know some of the baseball announcers have been unhappy with it and didn't want to sound like they were complaining, but basically they were complaining.
You know what, Mike? I don't think either one, Bob or myself, are complaining. Certainly, we would like to be at the games. Certainly, we would like to go down and mingle with the players and the coaching staff. But I think what we're going through here in 2020 and 2021 with this pandemic, it's best for everybody to stay as safe as possible. Don't take it for granted that, you know what, I got vaccinated, I got the second shot, I got the third shot, now I don't need the mask. You know what? Well, my philosophy is don't just think about yourself. Think about the people you run into and think about what happens. I mean, 2020, the world was turned upside down because it hit the elderly. And they were the ones that whenever we started a story, they would go, I remember when. So that's the history. And then all the kids that didn't get to graduate, you know, they pushed through it. But I still think that we have got to come together with an understanding that it's not about me. It's not about you. It's about all of us.
I couldn't agree with you more, Marty. I agree with you 1,000% on that. That's a great thought. And I wanted to ask you about your foundation because I know that for such a long time, you've done such great things and helped so many people with your foundation. For those of our viewers and listeners, Marty, who might still not be familiar with it, why don't you tell them what it's all about, how they can contact your foundation, how they can get involved, and just tell us a little bit about some of the work that you're doing with that.
Okay, Mike, I started it in 1982. My oldest son, Rocky, was born on March 4th. My dad suddenly died of a heart attack on March 8th. Little boy that has a big brother too died on March 10th at the age of 5.5. And here I was, 25 years old, a professional athlete. And I kept asking that question, why me? What am I doing wrong? And I remember Coach Bryant in college, he used to say, a winner in the game of life is the person that gives of themselves so others can grow. So I started a foundation for terminally ill children. I wanted to take their greatest wish in life, make it become a reality. And through the support of the New York Jets and Leon Hess and my teammates, and then the support of the community, you know, we're getting ready to celebrate 40 years.
Wow.
And we've sponsored over 8,000 families, and we operate in 13 states. The sad reality is that, you know, 60% of these kids that we work with will never have the opportunity to live a full life. But every one of these kids come down here, they come with a message to be strong. And I think the biggest message that I've learned from them, they say, always tell me, hey, if you have faith in God, don't fear dying. And if you have enough faith, when you do die, you'll get rewarded. You'll get to see everything that you believed in. So these kids are special, and they're here for a reason, and they're here for a short period of time, but we all can learn from them. And, you know, I've been blessed.
If our viewers want to get involved, Marty, or make some sort of donation, do you have a phone number or website that you'd like to share?
Yeah, if you could go to the Marty Lyons Foundation.org, And,
Okay, we'll have Michael, our producer,
yeah.
give that website again at the end of the show.
Yeah, and know that 92 cents out of every dollar we raise go directly to the kids.
Tremendous.
And it is amazing the smiles that you can put on their face and what you can learn about yourself too.
Marty, I cannot tell you how much I looked up to you as a player, how much I admire the work you do on Jet games, and even more so, the work that you do with your foundation. You were really, really generous with your time tonight. I really appreciate it. And please, if you love to come on again, we'd love to have you again.
Yeah, why don't we do that, Mike, somewhere during the middle of the season? Then this way we can start critiquing everything that's going on. It's a pleasure talking to you, getting to know you tonight on the podcast. And I really appreciate this opportunity. And everybody out there that is listening to you, please understand that, you know what, let's do what's right, not just for ourselves, but for others. And we can make a difference.
Agree with you more.
We can make a difference.
Absolutely, Marty. Marty, thanks so much again. It was a pleasure speaking with you. I'll stay in touch with you, and hopefully, as you say, we can have you on again in the middle of the season. That would be great.
You got it, Mike. Stay well.
You have a great night. Thank you. All right, folks. So that was Marty Lyons' thoughts with him. It was really great to have him on. Again, he was really generous of his time, gave us, what was that, a half hour, Michael Anthony? Wow. Amazing. Amazing. And while we're on the subject, folks, I want to do just a few minutes on the Giants. I mean, they're getting ready to open the season on the 12th. They have a 4:30 game against Denver. Really not very many surprises in paring the roster down from 80 to 53. I thought one of the main ones was at running back, where the Giants decided to move on from Corey Clement. Corey Clement had that fumble against the Jets. It was really the only drive that night, and I was in the building. It was really the only good drive in the first half that the Giants had. They got to about the 7-yard line, and Corey Clement fumbled. So, I mean, I guess he might have sort of sealed his fate that play. They decide to stay with the kid that they drafted at running back, Gary Brightwell. Evan Engram, the tight end, is now hurt. We'll see what happens with him. He's out with a calf, probably will be out for the opener. So that I see as being a little bit of a problem at tight end. Kyle Rudolph is still banged up, which leaves Caden Smith, who caught the touchdown pass from Daniel Jones in that final preseason game, as our really only viable, experienced option at tight end. I wouldn't be surprised after our buddy Tyler Davis, who we were supposed to have on a few weeks ago, was released, waived by Jacksonville, if the Giants don't bring him in and give him a look. I think that would be fantastic. I think that at least for the time that Evan Engram is on the shelf, bring in Davis, give him a look, and I think he would love. He's a local kid, graduated from Mepham High over in Belmore. So hopefully that'll happen, and hopefully we'll get Tyler on with us to talk about it. Giants stayed with two fullbacks, which kind of surprised me a little bit. Besides Elijah Penny, who's done a nice job, they also have the kid Cullen Gillespie at tight end. So they're going to go with two, and hopefully they use those guys not just to catch the ball out of the backfield, but also to block and also to carry the ball. The thing that surprised me a little bit at receiver was that the Giants did not keep the kid David Sills, who I think a lot of people, including myself, were high on. We saw a lot of him in the preseason, and he looked really good. I was sure the Giants were going to keep him. However, it was his lack of the ability to make a contribution on special teams that might have cost him a roster spot. Instead, the Giants gave a lot of work to C.J. Board returning kicks, and I think that's what got Board on the roster ahead of Sills. As far as the offensive line, the Giants traded defensive lineman B.J. Hill, brought in another offensive lineman, Billy Price. And other than that, they've got the same group back from last year. Gates at center, Thomas, Hernandez, Peart, Solder, and only one new guy they kept on the offensive line is Ben Bredesen. So we'll see what goes on with that. But I think that having some continuity from last year on the offensive line for the Giants is going to be a really good thing. I think that's going to, as Marty said, and as I've always thought, offensive lines take a year or a couple years to really gel and really solidify. Linebacker, again, you've got Blake Martinez, Tate Crowder, Carter Coughlin, who was playing well last year before he got hurt, Reggie Ragland. Really, the only surprise at defensive backfield was that Sam Beal made the team, and Xavier McKinney made the team at safety. So we're going to see what goes on with the Giants in that season opener. Again, Daniel Jones is going to be under fire from that very, very rugged defense of the Denver Broncos. We're going to see if he can stand up to it, if the Giant offensive line can stand up to it. That's going to be a big, big challenge coming right out of the gate. And as we talked about, Daniel Jones didn't get a lot of work. I mean, he got the first half of the last preseason game against the Patriots. Other than that, he really didn't get a lot. So we'll see what goes on with the Giants. Obviously, we'll be keeping an eye on that. But right now, folks, we're going to break away. We're going to hear this word from our sponsor, the Belfast Pub. When we come back on, we'll talk a little baseball, and we'll hear from our Met reporter, Chris Caputo, after the break.
Hi, my name is Dave Crow, proprietor of Belfast Gastro Pub in beautiful downtown Lindenhurst. We are the heartbeat of the village, serving exceptional dishes throughout the day, created by our executive chef, James Tomlinson. Whether it's to dine in our purpose-built outdoor dining area that seats 60 persons, or to enjoy a pint or a cocktail at our 40-foot mahogany bar. We also have a private catering room that can accommodate up to 60 guests. Love stories begin at Belfast.
Now back to Spot On Sports with Mike Trezor and Mike Godone.
Welcome back to Spot On Sports. Mike Trezor flying solo tonight without Mike Godone. Mike, I miss you. I hope everything's okay with your car, and I hope everything works out for the best. Love to have you here. And Mike will be back with us next time, obviously. Before we hear from Chris Caputo on the Mets in just a few minutes, let me see if I can squeeze in some quick Yankee talk. Obviously, big performance last night from Gerrit Cole, and the Yanks really needed that. After that 13-game winning streak, they immediately went on a 4-game losing streak. As soon as I posted something on Facebook, folks, as Ralph Cramden would say, I've got a big mouth. As soon as I bragged about that 13-game winning streak, they went on a 4-game losing streak. So they desperately needed a strong pitching performance last night from Gerrit Cole. He was fantastic. Struck out 15 batters in 7 innings. And I got to tell you, folks, earlier in the season, Mike Godone and I talked about it. We talked about it with Declan. Cole's reputation was really under fire in terms of him being a product strictly of sticky stuff. And if you look at the timeline in terms of the way this season played out, as soon as the crackdown on sticky stuff came, interestingly enough, Gerrit Cole's numbers really went south for a while. And now Cole has come back to his ace status, his true ace status. The performance he gave last night, I mean, I have to tell you, folks, I don't want to beat up on Ohtani. I like Ohtani. He made Ohtani look silly in that game. Silly. Yankee offense is now in high gear. Thankfully, guys like Judge are very hot right now. Stanton is very hot right now. And you guys know, when Stanton gets hot, you cannot get him out. Cannot get him out. So that bodes very well for the Yankee offense to have both Stanton and Judge hot at the same time. Those two guys, almost by themselves, can carry an offense. And I think that what's going to happen is come down the stretch of the season, as well as should the Yankees make the playoffs, should they advance from the wild card game into an actual series, you're going to continue to see the jumbo package in there in the outfield with either Gallo or Judge in center. The one who's not in the outfield, Stanton in the outfield as well, and Voit at DH, Rizzo at first. Okay, that's going to be a thing, folks. And then when you want to bring in Gardner late in the game to pinch run and stay in the outfield for the last couple innings for defensive purposes, that's what I think you're going to see happen. Aaron Judge talked last night. He talked about possibly going to a 6-man rotation. I think that's a really good idea. I do. You've got some really easy games coming up against teams like Baltimore. Not that Toronto is an easy series. They're not a bad team, but they've really fallen hard out of the race. Cleveland, Texas. I mean, again, these teams are not good. So now would be the time to implement that 6-man rotation if you're going to do it. Now is the time. Because if Cole wants to stay on a 5-day schedule, then I say keep him on a 5-day schedule and put the rest of the guys on a 6-game schedule. Okay? Tyone is a guy who I think could use an extra day right now. Tyone was bad early in the season, terrific in the middle of the season, and now has had a few outings that really have become cause for concern. Okay, so I'm concerned about Tyone. Montgomery's been fine, but again, he's a guy who just not having pitched full seasons in prior seasons is not used to this, so he could benefit from an extra day. If you have to throw an Andrew Heaney out there, if you have to throw a Luis Heel out there and extend all these guys out an extra day, I say do it. The thing that is concerning me right now is the bullpen. Now, Chapman looked good last night, but before that, Chapman has looked like absolute garbage, and it's been tough to take at times. Chad Green, I think, has been overworked, and so Green has been much less reliable than he usually is. I mean, right now, and Yankee fans might yell at me for saying this, I can really envision a scenario where Jonathan Loaisiga is your closer down the stretch of the season and even in a playoff series. Okay, so I'm concerned about the bullpen. When Kluber gets a little bit more stretched out, then you can send nasty Nestor Cortez back to the bullpen, and he can give you a lift. Cortez can play a number of different roles in that bullpen. He can be a guy who, if your starter gets bombed, comes in early in the game. He can be a regular 1-inning pitcher on an inning where you have a couple lefties coming up. He can be a setup guy late in the game in a 7th or even an 8th inning role. He's really, really valuable. Kluber, listen, I'm not much for second-guessing the manager, but I thought that Boone stayed with Kluber a little bit long. Yes, things did fall apart really quickly. I think that was Tuesday night that Kluber pitched. I mean, it wasn't like the guy was coming back from an injury from a couple weeks. He was out for 3 months. 3 months. And he cruised through the first 3 innings. And in the 4th inning, he couldn't get anybody out. And I was like, Aaron, where are you? Come on out. Get him out. Now, again, I'm not much on second-guessing the manager every game. Hey, you stay with this guy too long. Hey, you pulled that guy too long. Why'd you pitch that guy there? Why'd you... Folks, that gets tedious. It's paralysis by analysis, okay? But I will say that I thought that Boone kind of screwed up that night by leaving Kluber in. You have to get Kluber stretched out. You've probably got about 3 or 4 more starts to do that, maybe 5. I would take baby steps with Kluber because Kluber can really be a valuable asset come playoff time, but you might need a safety net. You might need Cortez to sort of be a caddy to Kluber. In case Kluber gets knocked out early, here comes Cortez in to relieve in the second or third inning. So we're going to see what happens with the Yankees. Judge is now at 30 home runs. As I mentioned, he's been really hot. Stanton is really hot. And between those two guys, they can really, really carry a team. As far as the Mets, MESS, mess. Listen, I'm going to get Chris on, and I don't want to steal his thunder, okay? But the Mets are a mess right now, folks. You have guys that I can't even believe it. I'm going to get Chris Caputo on here now. He's with us. Chris, how are you tonight? Chris, can you hear me? Did we lose Chris? All right. So while he's getting Chris back on the phone, folks, I have to tell you, I know people don't want to hear it from me because I'm very transparent about my fandom. I'm a Yankee fan. But that does not mean I'm looking for an excuse to beat up the Mets. But folks, you do not need right now an excuse to beat on the Mets. The Mets are beating on themselves on the field and off the field. I mean, this team, this organization, everything about it is a mess. And here comes Chris Caputo, a lifelong Met fan, a member of the 7-line army. And I guarantee, as a Met fan, he's even more disgusted than I am. Hi, Chris.
Can you hear me, Mike?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear the vitriolic rant I was going into?
Yeah, this is just interesting. I mean, if you start when the Wilpons had this team and the things that were going on and what's going on now, you would almost say that the Wilpons did a better job than what's going on now with Steve Cohen. I mean, when we were talking a little bit back with yesterday happening, I mean, this is just out of control. 2 GMs in 6 months and firing a manager after you hire them, and it is just it's a comic show. The response from everybody is only the Mets. It's going to happen, and you got guys looking for their earrings after they slide into home plate, and Sandy Alderson's out there, and thumbs up, thumbs down. If you saw Lindor was at the U.S. Open and he's signing autographs. Hey, give me a thumbs up, not a thumbs down. I mean, it's a comic scene right now.
Let's start on the field, Chris, because I brought up with you, I don't know if it was the last time or the time before, about the stretch against the Dodgers and the Giants. I don't want to say you played it down, but you said, hey, listen, this is not going to tell the tale of the season. But then the Mets go out and go 2-11 on that stretch, and now it's like, boy, oh boy, they need to get on a real roll. I know they've won 3 in a row, or you could say 4 in a row. Sean McCauley is commenting us saying Mets are a dumpster fire and that Baez is overrated. Mets have now put together a little streak, but Chris, you've got to get a much bigger streak, much longer streak, very quickly to get back in this race.
Yeah, and let's look at it 2 ways. Number one, they lost 8 games by 1 run, straight in a row. 8 games in a row that were losses were by 1 run. So you could say they were in the games with the Dodgers and the Giants. But you could also sit there and say you just beat up on the Nationals and the Marlins. And, what are you really accomplishing at this point? I always say the games in the division matter more. And if you look at it right now, the Mets are, give or take 5 out. And you're chasing the Phillies. You still have, a couple of games, 3 games left to them. You got 3 games at the end. You have to be 3 games out with the Braves at the end of the season.
Absolutely.
But let's see. I mean, at that point, you still have to sweep just to tie. And people are talking about the wild card. There's 4 teams ahead of them, which doesn't make
They're
sense.
not getting a wild card, Chris.
No,
Come on.
it's not happening. And people who are talking about that, would you rather win the wild card and have to play one game, or would you rather win the division and be in?
Well, listen, I mean, if you had your choice, you'd rather play the wild card than go home. But there's too, like you said, there are too many teams ahead of the Mets. They need to get back in the division race, and they need to do it in a hurry. But Chris, what I wanted to get to with you, because I know your time is short. Your take on the whole Baez thing. Did you think it was overblown for fans to be upset with Baez, not for the gesture itself, but for his explanation about what that gesture meant and sort of pitting himself against Met fans?
Yes, 100%. I think you're right. It's the explanation. He had to step up eventually and explain everything, but it's the fact that after the game was over, somebody says, hey, what does the thumbs down mean? And he pretty much says, hey, you guys booed us, we're booing you back. Now, you knew at that point somebody was going to come out and say something, team meeting, you guys need to apologize. The only guy that was going to step up maybe would be Alonso and say, hey, this is no good. But you're right. I mean, it wasn't just him. You got to think, Lindor comes out there the next day, and when he gives his apology, he's still kind of saying, this is the way I've done it in the past, and blah, blah, blah. You can't do that stuff. You have to stick to, this is me on the field, and this is what I'm doing. Any little signal that you get on the field, people are going to ask you what it is. And if you say things negative against the fans, they're going to be mad.
Yeah, you can't take on the fans.
No, and some people are going to say, hey, listen, who cares? You boo them, they're going to boo you back. Who cares as long as they score runs? But when you're batting 220, when you're striking out 162 times, you can't sit there and do this stuff. And it's antics that are very, it's just the Mets. You can go down a list of Duaner Sanchez getting, hurting himself in a cab, to Bobby Bonilla being paid for the next 16 years, to Steve Phillips getting himself into trouble. You could go on and on and on, and it's just a problem.
But the thing that Baez said that day at that press conference that bothered me more than anything else, Chris, was the fans have to be better. And I said to myself, no, they don't. You have to be better.
Mike, I don't usually ask you questions. Do you boo at all?
Yeah, I do. I've booed my own team. And honestly, that's my prerogative as a fan. Now, did I think the Met fans were a little tough early in the season on Lindor? Yes, I really did. Do I think the Yankee fans are tough on Stanton? Yes, I do. I think they are. They're unfair to both guys. But I've booed my own guys, and that's my prerogative.
Agreed. And not that the Mets were great, but they were in first place for 90 days and basically over a 30-day period lost 16 games. The total flip-flop. And you got to give the Braves credit. They went 16-2 at one point, but they collapsed. They're hitting with runners in scoring position, $1.40. I mean, this is terrible. And guys are coming up to the plate, not producing, one guy after the other. I'll sit there and blame injuries, sure. But for the most part, these guys who are getting paid hundreds of millions of dollars and not producing, fans have the right to say something. And you know what? You got to drown it out. And that's the thing that I think these guys haven't dealt with, is they haven't dealt with being here and drowning that stuff out and having to deal with it. And then the second part is having to face the media. These guys, a lot of it is they go on Twitter and they feel like, I don't know how to say it, but they could say whatever they want on Twitter.
Yes.
And they can almost cover themselves. And I think this new day and age, they're not ready to deal with, hey, I could boo a fan. You know how many people Marcus Stroman has blocked on Twitter or deleted from because they say anything negative about the Mets, you're gone. And I think these guys are just too sensitive. They want to say what they want, but nobody can say it back to them.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing. I know athletes don't like to hear the fans pay your salary, but the fans do pay your salary. The fans don't have to be better. The only thing I have to do when I show up to a game, Chris, is, I mean, obviously we saw really troubling incidents when the NBA let fans back in, people being throwing stuff at players, people spitting on players. That stuff is beyond the pale. I don't think anybody would argue that. But, I mean, it is my prerogative as a fan to express my displeasure. If your team is playing like garbage and you strike out with the bases loaded and you look really bad doing it, guess what? I have the right to say, boo. Now, to curse you out and to call you vulgar names, no, that's beyond the pale. But to express my displeasure in what I think is the most gentlemanly way possible, yeah, absolutely, 100%.
And baseball, those guys are further. The fans are further from the field than they are. I mean, you think about the Palace at the Malice and what happened there with fans being able to get involved and throw things. You don't have that at a baseball stadium. You know, for the most part, you don't have guys throwing things at you on the field. You don't have guys who are harassing you in that way. Now, are there incidents of that? Sure. But I think you're right. We're sitting here talking about the New York Mets with off the field actions. Now, why should a Steinbrenner or a Cohen have to go in and have a team meeting to say this is the way you're going to act on the field? It shouldn't happen. And then we can go even further, Mike, and start talking about what you're doing behind the wheel at 4:00 in the morning on a Tuesday.
Perfect segue. I was going to get to, I know your time is short, so I want to get this in before you have to jump. And that's the situation with Zach Scott.
I honestly, I don't know what to say. I mean, he didn't take the breathalyzer. So he left Steve Cohen's, let's say, at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. At 4:00 in the morning, he falls asleep behind the wheel in New York when he was in Connecticut. What was he doing for 7 hours? I have no idea. Why did he refuse to take the breathalyzer? Because he was obviously doing something. He's done. He's got to go. He wasn't going to come back next year anyway. But here's my biggest thing with this. Zach Scott was a fill-in. Two problems. Number one, this is the second Theo Epstein guy that the Mets have had to get rid of. And who are they talking about possibly bringing in? Even though the guy's happy what he's doing off the field right now, Theo Epstein. Don't like that. Number two, guess who's back in charge for the Mets? Sandy Alderson. Yeah. And Sandy's had his chance. It's time to move on, Mike. No more Sandy.
No,
he's done.
I agree with you. I'm really astounded, Chris, that I haven't heard talk show hosts and fans talking about this. Jared Porter, a Sandy hire. Mickey Callaway, that pig and that pervert, a Sandy
Disgusting
guy. And now Zach Scott. Guess what, Sandy? This is baseball. 3 strikes, you're out.
Yeah, and think about the Mets had 2 people in their front office, not people like, that they've had to get rid of because they were in their public relations department, that they said, we're going to keep around for 2 more months so that they can train other people. Who does that? Who keeps around a guy who's a bad guy to train somebody else? Because we don't have somebody there. There is a bad culture there, and I've kind of talked to some people kind of behind the scenes. These Mets, the players themselves, they don't get along. As much as you want to hear it, oh, yeah, they love each other, they go to bats for each other. They don't like each other. And number two, I've talked to some people that work there. They put a smile on their face, but it's a bad culture there. And, there's a lot of, hey, we're going to hold your hand and make sure you don't do this. Things need to change. And if you're bringing in a guy who's a billionaire who actually has another company and he's not really paying attention, unfortunately, Mike, these are the things that are happening.
Yeah, and Steve Cohen acts like this whole thing is a joke. The aspect of this that I talked with Michael Anthony off the air, and he made this point, which I've made to people in the last few days. You're Zach Scott. You're not just getting popped for a DWI. You're somebody in authority. You're supposed to be setting example for 25 and 27-year-old ball players. Not that they're kids, but they look up to the manager and the GM and guys in the front office to set an example in terms of behavior. And you're out there getting busted for DWI at 4:00 in the morning. I can't take it.
It's terrible. And Mike, what's the whole, I mean, I know it's today, it just happened. What is the whole, hey, he's on administrative leave. He's gone. Goodbye. You got pulled over and you fell asleep at a light at 4:00 in the morning, coming home after a benefit. You're done. Cut him off. What are we keeping the umbilical cord with so many people? Bring in a new regime. You need to, 2 words, clean house. And I'm talking middle of the lineup. These guys can't hit. They can't produce. Get them out of here. Bring something new in. I'm talking scouts. You don't know how to go after people. You're signing. Think about this, Mike. You got a guy that you were like, oh, yeah, he fell to number 12 in Rocker. You couldn't sign the guy because you were worried, oh, maybe he got hurt. Clean house.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Chris. It's a bad culture. I think Met fans, including Mike Cadona, and I talked about this at length. When Steve Cohen took over, they thought that a new owner meant a new culture. But as you've alluded to a couple times, it seems like it's not only the same old culture, it might be worse than the old one under the Wilpons.
And the guy who looks like a saint is the guy who's standing in a dugout all day, who got this job by default, and that's Louis Rojas. And he honestly, he's filling out the lineup card every day, and he's not doing much better. I mean, some of these guys are producing. We didn't really talk much baseball tonight, Mike, but to be honest with you, these guys are not pitching terribly. They're just not scoring runs. I mean, Marcus Stroman is pitching really well. Tyler McGill is not a bad pitcher. Loop is one of the best relievers in baseball. Diaz is pitching really well. Some of these guys are going out there. Walker's having 6 innings of nothing. But we're not talking about them because they're an absolute joke off the field. I mean, you think about things like Trevor Bauer. What is baseball doing right now to put themselves in a bad situation? I mean, it's hard to go out there and root for a team.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Chris. And I'm glad you brought up Rojas, because I went out of my way early in the season to be more than fair to him. I said, hey, listen, he had a lot to navigate between the whole dust-up between McNeil and Lindor, between the whole firing of Chili Davis. And I thought he did a nice job. But, when this when this situation breaks with Baez, you cannot stand there and play Sergeant Schultz. I know nothing. I see nothing. He didn't know what was going on with the thumbs down. He never thought to ask a ball player, hey, what is that all about when you get a hit or hit a home run, you're giving the thumbs down? I mean, have your finger on the pulse of your locker room. My goodness.
Hey, Mike, is Syndergaard throwing any curveballs? Ask Rojas, see what he says. His answer was, "Oh, I didn't know anything about that. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You're bringing back a guy who you possibly want to pitch for you for next year, and you don't even know if he's going to be throwing anything besides fastballs and changeups. And then all of a sudden he gets COVID. I told you guys, he's done for the year. He's sitting at home. He had the vaccine and he's throwing. Come on, Rojas has no idea what's going on. There's just a culture that." The left hand's not talking to the right hand. It doesn't help that COVID's going on. But these guys are there 3 hours before. There's no communication going on. But the big word, as I said, number one is clean house, and number two, it's accountability. There's just no accountability there.
Yeah, I think honestly, I mean, Sandy Alderson has to be the first guy out of this building. I don't want to see Sandy Alderson. I don't want to hear from him anymore. I mean, he didn't send dirty pictures. He didn't get a DWI, but you're bringing in all these guys that had all of these issues, Chris. It's too much. You have to go.
But here's the thing. Do you think bringing in Theo Epstein, who is kind of Sandy Alderson, kind of these other two guys who were GMs were underneath him, is that going to make anything better? He's going to come in and ask for part ownership of the team. I don't think that's the route to go. Don't go out and get Billy Beane. Don't go out and get some analytics guy who worked for the Athletics. You have to go in a 100% different direction.
Yeah, but does Steve Cohen, I mean, as much as he has the business acumen, does he have anybody in place that can do that kind of search and come up with the right guy for the job? That's the big question.
Well, I think he's going to let Sandy do it, which is it's absolutely terrible. He doesn't have baseball minds in there, and that's part of the problem. And he's got to take his money and try and go after somebody. I mean, it's not going to happen, but you go steal yourself a Brian Cashman. You go get yourself a big-time guy who's out there and, knows what's going on. I have a couple of names, I'm not going to throw them, but you got to go get somebody who is going to be accountable. He's going to have people underneath him that know what they're doing. But it's just, it's such a show right now that we can't sit here for 10 minutes and talk about how the Mets are 5 games out and could possibly start making a move, and they're going to have double headers at the end. And then we could start talking about what we're doing with Jake DeGrom, which is another fiasco.
That's true.
And I mean, they are hiding everything as much as they can, and then the little stuff comes out. I think this whole people knew about this this stuff with Zach Scott when everybody was trying to apologize, because this happened Monday night into Tuesday, and I saw things. Hey, is this true that this guy got pulled over? They're trying to hide this big stuff when it's all slapping them right in the face. And I'm glad you brought it up tonight, but it's just so sad that you just can't talk baseball.
Yeah, that is. Anyway, Chris, I appreciate you. I know you got a lot going on tonight, so I don't want to hold you. Terrific job as always. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks, buddy. All right?
All right. Well, it was really nice seeing Cole on the mound. So I hope you're excited to, be pushing that team forward. I think they made a nice run, and don't focus on the negative. The Yankees are a really good baseball team.
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep that in mind next time Chapman comes in and walks the ballpark and then gives up a grand slam.
Well, next weekend I'll be there for Diaz giving up 3 homers and Chapman coming in 5 minutes later and walking 5 guys, and we're like, who's going to wind up finishing this game out for both teams?
Who wants to give it away more?
And there was some other stuff out there too. You saw the stuff probably with Michael Kay. I thought that was a little bit disconcerting.
What was?
I think one of the guys came out and said that I think Stroman came out. Again, you'd have to look it up. One of the guys I think on the Mets came out and said that Michael Kay shouldn't be saying stuff against blacks, and he doesn't have the ability to be saying this stuff.
Please.
So then this stuff just goes on, and these guys use social media, and unfortunately, what should be a solemn, great game between the Mets and Yankees next week on September 11th is going to be overshadowed by a lot of this junk.
2 quick things, Chris. My buddy Ray commented us. He says, bring back Buck Showalter. You interested in Buck?
With the Mets? Put it this way. Every time Buck Showalter leaves, the guy after him wins. So if it's going to guarantee me a world championship after he leaves, yeah, sure. I like the stuff that.
Yeah, but you know what though, Chris? In all seriousness, Buck is a disciplinarian. You want some discipline? You want a guy who's not a player running the show? Then maybe you do want to take a look at Buck.
But do these guys listen to the Buck Showalter? Do the Lindors really react to the Showalters? They want a guy who's going to be like, hey, do what you want. Is it going to be 2 heads clashing? I kind of get it. I mean, I wish everybody else got a second chance, like Cora and Hinch and all these guys. Why can't Beltran get another chance? I mean, it sounds stupid, and the Mets kind of go back and hit their. I'd love to see a guy like Joe McEwing. That's my guy. Who I'd love to see. Super Joe. He's had situations. I'd love to see him with the Mets. These guys that, weren't superstars, but they know how to manage at the lower level.
Which game of the Yankee Met series are you going to go to, Chris?
Saturday, September 11th.
Are you going on September 11th? Yeah, I was thinking about it, but the tickets are.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk off the air if you want to sit with Met fans.
All right.
Yeah, and then I got some tickets to other games, but it just gets, honestly, Mike, it just gets so depressing, and people are being interviewed and asked about this stuff, and unfortunately, you just can't concentrate on the stuff on the field when there's so much stuff off the field. And it's nice to see Conforto get a couple of hits here or there. It's nice to see the Mets come back from 5-1, but when you have to deal with all the other stuff, it's an embarrassment. And, you're involved in education. You go back to school and people know you're a Met fan. They just want to point your finger in your face and say, hey, look at you. You guys are a laughing stock. And they're right.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Okay. Talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, folks. So that's going to do it for us tonight. Great show tonight. We were really thrilled to have Marty Lyons as our guest. It was great. We're here at the Format Studio in beautiful downtown Deer Park. Part of the J12 family of podcasts. We're thrilled to be so. Our producer engineer is the great Michael Anthony. Our theme music, Spot On, is by Scott Daly. Our logo art is by Valerie Hanatic, the Jets fanatic. Our voiceover guy is the amazing Archie Snowden. Thanks to Chris Caputo for hopping on with us. For everybody here at Spot On Sports, including my partner, Mike Gadone, this is Mike Trezor thanking you for watching. We'll see you next time on Spot On Sports.